Hey all, glad you're here for the show. I'm happy you're with me today. Ever seen an old big castle in photos and thought about what life was like there? Maybe you've pictured kings and queens, knights, and grand balls. We often think of them as places from fairy tales, like in a Disney film. But what if I said these castles hide dark, deep secrets? They're full of tales about mystery, sadness, and power. Today, we'll dive into some of these cool stories together. We'll jump across time and places to find the truths about some famous castles and the rulers who made them. You'll see these royal homes weren't always joyful spots. They were lonely, full of sneaky plots, and sometimes even murder. So settle in. Let's start our trip into the hidden lives of castles and kings. First, we go to Germany, up in the Bavaria Mountains. Here we find what might be the top fairy tale castle, Neuschwanstein. If it looks familiar, you've probably seen it. It inspired Sleeping Beauty's castle at Disneyland. With high white towers and blue roofs, it seems like it's straight from a story. It's pretty, sitting on a rough hill, circled by dark green woods. Yet, this castle's tale isn't a cheerful one. It's about a lonely king who wished to leave real life behind. This king was Ludwig II of Bavaria. He was different from other kings. He didn't care for politics or wars. He was a dreamer. He loved art, music, and old tales about brave knights. He wanted to live in a fantasy world, so he started to build it himself. He began Neuschwanstein in 1869. It wasn't made for defense like old castles. It was more of a private escape, a backdrop for his dreams. NNBUT, here's our first secret. While the outside of the castle feels olden, inside it was way ahead of its time. Ludwig loved new tech. The castle had water all over, hot water in the kitchen and baths too. It had flush toilets, a big deal then. There was even a phone line, one of the first in that area. He also had electric bells to call his servants. So while Ludwig played a medieval knight, he also wanted all modern comforts. He made a fantasy, but a handy one. He put all his cash and a lot of borrowed money into this. The castle turned into his fixation. He'd visit the build site and picture his life there, with his favorite opera scenes on the walls. This dream turned sour for his government, though. They saw their king dump loads of cash on a fantasy castle while ditching real king duties. They began to say he was crazy. The truth might be he was just very shy, artsy, and unhappy as a king. He got more lonely, sticking to his build sites. He never saw Neuschwanstein finished. In 1886, his government called him insane and took his crown. They moved him to another castle. A day later, he and his doctor were found dead in a lake. They said it was suicide, but even now, no one is sure. Was it an accident or murder? This is the darkest castle secret. Just weeks after his odd death, the half-done castle opened to visitors. The place Ludwig made to hide from the world turned into a spot for everyone. Now it shows us a lonely king whose pretty dream ended, sadly. Next, from a castle built for a lonely dream, we move to one built for power and fear. We're off to London's heart, to a fortress nearly 1,000 years old, the Tower of London. It's not your fairy tale castle. It's a big, gray stone place with a dark, scary past. It was a royal home, a jail, an execution spot, and even a zoo. But its top secret is a puzzle over 500 years old. It's about two young princes who vanished without a mark. In 1483, England was shaky. King Edward IV died quick. His son, also Edward, was set to be the next king, Edward V. He was just 12. His little brother Richard was only 9. Since the new king was so young, his uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, was picked to look after him and the kingdom until he was ready to be king. And TWO young boys, who were princes, were sent to live in the Tower of London. This wasn't odd back then. That place was like a royal house, and kings often stayed there before they became king. They played in the gardens and looked happy and safe. But their uncle, Richard, had different ideas. He tried to make himself king. He said that his brother's wedding was not right, so the boys were not the true heirs. Soon, he made himself King Richard III. The boys? They were seen less, and none saw them after mid-1483. They just vanished. What happened? Many think their uncle had them killed to keep the throne. He had a lot to gain. With the boys gone, his role as king was safe. Yet, he never said he did it, and no one found proof then. NNTHE mystery of the princes lingered in the tower for many years. Then, in 1674, something big happened. While fixing a stair in the White Tower, workers found a box with 2 small children's bones under the stairs. They were as old as the princes. Many thought it was them. King Charles II thought so too, and he had them laid to rest at Westminster Abbey, like royals. But this did not end the talk. In the 1900s, experts looked at the bones. They were the right age, but they couldn't be sure who they were. So, the mystery stays. The tower holds many dark tales, but none as sad or as hidden as that of the 2 boys who went in and never left. It shows that a house can also be a grave. NNNOT. All hidden things are about dying or vanishing. Some are about power. Next, we head to France, to the shiny palace of Versailles. This wasn't a gloomy old castle. It shined with gold and mirrors and had perfect gardens all around. It was where King Louis XIV, the Sun King, lived. He ruled France for 72 years, wanting to be the strongest king. Versailles was his tool. Its secret wasn't in a dark corner, but right out in the open, in how the palace was laid out and in its strict rules. Before Louis XIV, the big families had their own lands and issues. They would fight the king. Louis had a smart, sneaky plan. NNHE built the most amazing palace and made all the major families live there with him. It sounds good, right? But it was a trap, a fancy cage. By making them come to Versailles, he took away their true power. Now, they lived for the king. Their life was run by a complex system of rules. Just the way you knocked on the king's door was set. Use your little finger. Things like who could sit when he was there were also fixed. A person's worth was shown by how close they were to the king. A big honor was to see the king get up or to handle his shirt. These might seem silly, but they were a way to control. The nobles were so busy trying for the king's liking and a better place at court that they couldn't make plans against him. They wanted a better social spot, not direct power. The palace showed the king's total power. The Hall of Mirrors was made to wow anyone who came and show off France's strength. The gardens, perfect and controlled, showed the king could control nature and his land. But life there had another side. It was full and not always tidy or grand. It was cold in the winter and loud and smelly with so many there. Life for the nobles was a day-long show. They had little private life. Versailles' big secret is that it was a clever design to keep the king safe and in power, turning those who could challenge him into people who cared more about looks than conflict. At times, the deep tales of a castle are not from years of events, but from one big, sudden act. This tale takes us to Prague, now in the Czech Republic. Here, looking down on the city, stands Prague Castle. It's one of the largest old castle groups in the world, filled with palaces, churches, and halls. It has been home to kings, rulers, and presidents for over 1,000 years. Its walls have seen many key events, but one of the oddest happened on a spring day in 1618. This event is known as the Defenestration of Prague. Defenestration just means tossing someone out of a window. That's what happened that day. Back then, Europe was in a tough fight over religion between Catholics and Protestants. The Catholic Holy Roman Emperor ruled over Bohemia, where Prague is. But many there were Protestants. Things were tense. NNTHE Emperor said he would let the Protestants worship freely, but his men in Prague did not treat them well. They closed their churches and broke their rights. Angry Protestant nobles had had enough. They headed to Prague Castle to face the emperor's men. They found 2 of the emperor's governors and their aide in a high office. They argued and blamed them for going back on the emperor's word. The argument grew hot. The nobles said the governors were foes of freedom. They held a fast, simple trial then and there. They found the men guilty. Their sentence? To be thrown out of the window NNSO. The nobles tossed the 2 governors and their aide out of the 3rd-floor window. It was a 70-foot drop. You'd think they'd die, but something odd happened. They all lived. They fell onto a huge pile of horse manure and trash below. The Catholics said it was a miracle, a sign from God. The Protestants just called it luck. But this odd event was the spark for more trouble. It set off a revolt in Bohemia against the emperor, which grew into the huge 30 Years' War. This war drew in most countries in Europe and led to great loss and pain. It's wild to think a whole war started with men being tossed out a window into trash.